My name is Athena Reynolds. I'm 33 years old. 2 months ago, my mother stood up at our annual family reunion, held a microphone in front of 47 relatives, and announced she was giving her entire estate to my brother. When I asked why, she looked at me and said, "Because you were never really mine. I only kept you because your father made me." Everyone at that table already knew I wasn't her biological daughter. My dad brought me home as a newborn after my birth mother passed away. Virginia raised me. I called her mom for 33 years. That was never a secret. But hearing her say she'd been pretending to love me, that she'd faked it for 3 decades because my father forced her hand, that was new. That was a knife I didn't see coming. Before I take you back to that afternoon, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly speaks to you. Let me take you back to early June, the day my mother tried to bury me, and the day I decided to dig up a truth she never wanted found. The Reynolds farm sits on 120 acres outside Millbrook, Virginia. Rolling pasture, a white oak tree line along the creek, and a farmhouse my father built with his own hands 40 years ago. Every board, every beam, Harold Reynolds measured it, cut it, nailed it himself. I grew up knowing I wasn't Virginia's biological daughter. Dad never hid it. He told me when I was old enough to ask, "Your birth mother's name was Claire. She passed away a few weeks after you were born. I brought you home because you're my daughter." Simple. No drama. No shame. He carried me into this town in broad daylight, and every neighbor on Route 12 knew the story. Virginia agreed to raise me, and the community praised her for it. What a good woman, they said, taking in Harold's child like her own. But I always felt the difference. James sat in the front seat of Virginia's car. I sat in the back. James got asked what he wanted for dinner. I ate what was served. James heard, "You're so much like me." I heard, "You should be grateful." The gaps were small enough to explain away. Maybe I was just quieter. Maybe Virginia bonded more naturally with her biological son. Maybe I was reading into things. Then Dad would come home from the workshop, sawdust on his flannel, and pull me into a hug that smelled like oak and turpentine. "You are my daughter," he'd say. "Not more, not less." He never treated James and me differently, not once. I remember being 9, standing in the hallway past my bedtime, hearing Virginia tell our neighbor Mrs. Calloway something she thought I couldn't hear. "I raised that girl because Harold wants me to. I never had a choice in it." I went back to bed. I didn't cry. I just decided I'd be so good that one day she'd choose me on her own. She never did. Dad died 5 years ago. Heart attack on a Tuesday morning, halfway between the barn and the house. He was 62. At the funeral, Virginia delivered the eulogy. She mentioned James by name 3 times. She mentioned the farm, the community, Harold's siblings. She talked about what a devoted husband he was, what a provider. She never said my name. I sat in the second pew, between Aunt Margot and Cousin Rachel, and I told myself it was grief. People forget things when they're grieving. It didn't mean anything. After the burial, when the last casserole dish had been returned and the relatives had driven home, Virginia found me in Dad's workshop. I was sitting on his stool, holding a chisel he'd sharpened the morning he died. She stood in the doorway, didn't step inside. She looked at me the way you look at a piece of furniture that came with the house, something you never picked, something you tolerate because removing it would leave a mark on the floor. "Things are going to be different now," she said. "Your father isn't here to protect you anymore." I didn't understand that sentence for 5 years. After Harold's death, Virginia shifted. Not overnight, slowly, like a tide pulling back. She started calling James weekly, then daily. She invited him to the farm for financial planning meetings that I only learned about from Aunt Margot. She rearranged the living room and moved every photo of Dad and me to the hallway closet. She didn't fight me. She didn't yell. She just stopped seeing me, stopped calling, stopped asking. One Thanksgiving, I drove 2 hours to Millbrook with a pecan pie, Dad's favorite recipe. Virginia opened the door, looked at me like I was a delivery driver, and said, "Oh, James isn't coming until tomorrow. You should have called first. I ate Thanksgiving dinner alone at her kitchen table while Virginia watched television in the next room. The chair at the head of the table, Dad's chair, was pushed against the wall, covered with a stack of magazines. The next Christmas, I wasn't invited at all. I found out from Cousin Rachel's Instagram. Virginia and James in matching sweaters, grinning in front of the tree Dad and I used to cut together from the back ridge every December. I told myself she was grieving in her own way. I was wrong. Virginia wasn't grieving. Virginia was preparing. 3 months before the reunion, Virginia called me on a Sunday evening. Her voice had that particular sweetness she used when she wanted something, warm syrup over cold steel. Athena, I've been thinking. I'm 67. I can't manage this farm alone anymore. I need you to come home. Come home meant sell my apartment in the city, quit the proximity to my firm, and move back to Millbrook to take care of her full time. Mom, I can visit every month. I'll help you find a caregiver. We can interview. A stranger? In Harold's house? Her voice sharpened. You're my daughter. This is your responsibility. James is busy. He has a career. I let that land. James had a career. I had a career too. 7 years at an accounting firm, CPA license, a corner office I'd earned by working Saturdays for 3 years straight. But Virginia never called what I did a career. She called it Athena's little job in the city. Mom, I'm not selling my apartment. Silence. The kind that hums. After everything I sacrificed for you, she said. 33 years I raised you, fed you, clothed you, and you can't even... I'm grateful, Mom, but gratitude doesn't mean giving up my life. More silence. Then her voice dropped. Not louder, but flatter, colder, like a door clicking shut. Fine, you'll see the consequences at the reunion. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding the dead phone, telling myself it was just anger. Virginia made threats when she felt cornered. She'd cool off. She always cooled off. I didn't know she'd already drafted the speech. I didn't know James had been consulted. I didn't know the microphone was already ordered. First Saturday of June. 86 degrees. The kind of heat that makes you squint before you even step out of the car. I pulled into the gravel drive at the farm and counted vehicles. 17 cars, 3 trucks, 2 minivans. Both sides of the family, Reynolds and Kincaid, packed onto the back lawn where Dad used to set up the horseshoe pit every 4th of July. Long tables draped in checkered cloth, coolers sweating in the shade, the smoker going since dawn, filling the air with hickory and pork shoulder, kids chasing each other around the white oak. 47 people, give or take, spread across the property like it was any other year. I came alone. Parked at the far end of the drive and walked toward the crowd. James was already there. He'd arrived the night before. I could tell because his rental car had dew marks on the windshield. He sat next to Virginia at the head table, leaning back in his chair, relaxed, one arm draped over the back of her seat. He saw me, gave a single nod from across the yard. No hug. No hey sis. Just a nod. That was different. Aunt Margot intercepted me by the lemonade table, pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and sunscreen. She's been shuffling papers all morning, Margot whispered against my ear. Something's coming. I don't know what. I looked past Margot's shoulder toward the head table. Virginia sat straight-backed, hair freshly set, wearing the navy dress she saved for church and funerals. Full makeup, pearl earrings. This wasn't a barbecue outfit. This was a stage costume. And there, beside her plate, propped against the salt shaker, a wireless microphone. Virginia picked up the microphone at 4:17 p.m. I know the exact time because I glanced at my phone when I heard the feedback squeal, that sharp electric whine that made everyone stop mid-sentence and turn toward the head table. She tapped it twice, smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. If I could have everyone's attention for a moment, I have an announcement. The yard went quiet in stages, laughter dying off, conversations trailing into whispers, kids shushed by their parents. 47 faces turned toward Virginia Reynolds, matriarch, widow, the woman who held this family together. That was the story, anyway. As you all know, Harold left us 5 years ago. Since then, I've been thinking about the future of this farm, the house, our family's legacy. She paused, let the gravity settle. I've made my decision. Everything, the farm, the house, my savings, will go to James, my son, the only real family I have. James sat beside her, jaw set, eyes forward. Not surprised, not even a flicker. Uncle Dean stood up at the far table. Virginia, what about Athena? She's part of this family too. Virginia turned toward Dean the way a teacher turns toward a child who's spoken out of turn. Sit down, Dean. This is my decision. Then she looked at me. Across 40 feet of mowed grass and checkered tablecloth and 47 silent relatives. Athena was never really mine. I raised her because Harold made me. 33 years I pretended. But Harold is gone now, and I'm done pretending. A child at the next table tugged her mother's sleeve. Doesn't Grandma love Aunt Athena, Mommy? Nobody answered her. I could feel 47 pairs of eyes on me, some horrified, some pitying. Uncle Dean's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping from 20 feet away. Aunt Margot had her hand over her mouth. Cousin Rachel was gripping the table edge with both hands, knuckles white. And James. James sat perfectly still beside Virginia, eyes fixed on some middle distance, face arranged into an expression of carefully practiced neutrality. He didn't flinch. He didn't look at me. He didn't shift in his chair. He'd known. He'd rehearsed this too. Not the words, but the stillness. The art of sitting next to a detonation and pretending you can't hear the blast. I stood there holding a paper plate, potato salad, a bread roll. My hands were steady. My chest wasn't. I set the plate on the table, straightened my back, looked at Virginia. Thank you for finally being honest about it, Mom. Then I turned around and walked to my car. 2 hours on the interstate, windows up, radio off. Just the road and the engine and the white noise inside my skull. I drove the speed limit the entire way, because that's what I do when I'm falling apart. I follow rules. I signal lane changes. I count mile markers. It's the only thing keeping my hands from shaking. At mile marker 41, I started counting what I'd lost. First, a mother. Not biologically. I'd always known that. But emotionally. Virginia just announced to 47 people that she'd been faking it. 33 years of birthday cards, holiday dinners, and goodnight kisses. All performance. All obligation. Second, the farm. Dad built that house. Hammered every nail, sanded every banister. He planted the white oaks along the creek when I was 3, told me they'd be tall enough to climb by the time I was 10. He was right. The farm wasn't just property. It was Harold Reynolds in physical form, and Virginia was handing it to James alone. Third, Dad's honor. Virginia told everyone Harold forced her to raise me. Painted him as the kind of man who'd guilt his wife into mothering a child she didn't want. She made it sound sordid, shameful, like he'd committed some moral crime by bringing his own daughter home. But I was there. Or rather, I existed because of what happened. Dad didn't sneak me through the back door at midnight. He carried me into Millbrook in broad daylight. He introduced me to every neighbor on Route 12. He put my name on the mailbox next to his. Harold Reynolds never hid from anything in his life. And now he was dead, and Virginia was rewriting him into a man who deserved to be ashamed. He couldn't correct her. He'd been in the ground 5 years, and she was editing his story with a microphone and a phone tree. Fourth, the story. Virginia would control the narrative now. The grieving mother, the ungrateful adopted daughter, the tragic sacrifice. But here's the thing about being a CPA. You live by numbers, verifiable data. Virginia made a public claim that I wasn't real family, that only blood mattered. Fine. Let's talk about blood. I remembered something. 3 years ago, James's wife, Lily, posted a photo on Facebook. James holding a little blue box, grinning. Caption: Birthday gift for the hubby. Let's find out if he's secretly royalty. An ancestry DNA kit. James had a profile on the database. His results were already in the system. I pulled into my apartment complex at 6:48 p.m., opened my laptop before I took off my shoes. Search bar, Ancestry DNA kit, same-day delivery. 48 hours after the reunion, my phone rang 11 times. Not one of those calls started with, "Are you okay?" Virginia moved fast. I'll give her that. The woman could work a phone tree like a campaign manager. Cousin Beth from the Kincaid side called first. "Athena, honey, I heard what happened. Virginia's just devastated. She says you stormed off without even—" "I didn't storm off, Beth. I walked to my car." "Well, she said you made a scene. She says she's been carrying this secret for 33 years, and it's been eating her alive." Virginia's narrative was already forming. The martyr mother, burdened with another woman's child, finally breaking under the weight of her own sacrifice. She wasn't the villain. She was the victim. James texted me that evening. 3 messages, no greeting. "Athena, don't make this bigger than it is. Mom told the truth. You should accept it and move on. Call her. Apologize." I stared at that last word. Apologize. For what? For standing in my own family's yard and hearing my mother say she'd faked loving me? Then Rachel, Aunt Margot's daughter, 29, sharp as a tack, sent me a screenshot. Virginia had posted on Facebook, privacy set to friends. 33 years I sacrificed for a child who wasn't mine. Now I choose peace. 42 likes, 12 heart reacts, comments full of, "You're so brave, Virginia, and God sees your heart." That evening, Aunt Carol from the Kincaid side called. Her voice was careful, almost apologetic. "Athena, I don't know if I should say this, but Virginia told a few people that Harold forced her to keep you because he felt guilty about that woman. She's saying Harold nearly left the family over her. My father, the most honest man in Millbrook. And Virginia was turning him into the villain of a story he couldn't correct. That was the moment the DNA test stopped being about inheritance. It became about Harold. Aunt Margot drove 2 hours on a Wednesday afternoon to sit at my kitchen table and drink coffee that was too strong for both of us. She brought an album. Not the official family one Virginia kept in the living room cabinet. This was Margot's personal collection. Snapshots with curled edges and dates stamped in orange along the bottom. She opened to a page near the middle. A photo of Dad holding me as a newborn. Red-faced, eyes shut, wrapped in a yellow blanket. Dad looked wrecked. Unshaved, dark circles, flannel unbuttoned. But smiling. That Harold Reynolds half-smile that crinkled only the left side of his face. He hadn't slept in 3 days when I took this, Margot said. Claire had just passed. He was doing everything alone. Formula, diapers, the drive to the hospital and back. And when I got to his house, he was sitting in the kitchen with you on his chest, and the first thing he said was, "This is my daughter." She turned a few pages, paused. "I need to tell you something, Athena. Before your father met Claire, before any of that, Virginia was very close with a man at her office, Neil Whitfield. I don't have proof. I don't have dates. But Harold changed during that time. He was sad in a way I'd never seen." Margot closed the album, looked at me straight. "If anyone in this house has a secret, it's not Harold. Harold lived in the light." I sat with that. Margot wasn't a woman who said things lightly. She'd been a school teacher for 35 years. She weighed words like a pharmacist weighs pills, no more than necessary, never less than accurate. Then I picked up the album again, flipped to the pages with James as a toddler. Brown curly hair, blue eyes, square jaw, tall for his age. Dad had brown eyes, a round face, broad shoulders from labor, not genetics, compact build. James didn't look like Harold. I'd never noticed before, or maybe I had, and I'd just never let myself finish the thought. The Ancestry DNA kit arrived in a white box with blue lettering. I set it on the kitchen counter and stared at it for 10 minutes. The instructions were simple. Spit in a tube, seal it, mail it back. Wait 2 to 3 weeks for results. My goal was straightforward: confirm that Harold Reynolds was my biological father. Virginia was already telling people he'd felt guilty about that woman, implying I might not even be Harold's. If his family line showed up in my DNA, that lie died on arrival. But there was a second reason I didn't plan. James's profile was already in the Ancestry database. Lily had given him that kit 3 years ago. His results were uploaded, active, searchable. When my results came back, the system would automatically compare our DNA and calculate a relationship prediction. If James and I were full siblings, roughly 50% shared DNA. Half siblings, around 25%. If something else was going on, something that involved a man named Neil Whitfield and a photograph stamped Spring Fling 88, the number would tell me. I opened the tube, followed the instructions, sealed it, drove to the post office and handed it to the clerk at 4:07 p.m. on a Tuesday. Then I went home and waited. Waiting is the hardest part, not because I was scared of the answer. I already knew who my father was. Harold Reynolds taught me to change a tire, balance a checkbook, and look people in the eye when they're lying to me. No spit test would undo that. The hard part was knowing that while I waited, Virginia wasn't waiting. She was calling, posting, rewriting, building a version of history where Harold was the sinner and she was the saint. And I couldn't stop her. Not yet. I'm sitting here waiting for DNA results, and I realize I'm not waiting to find out who I am. I already know. I'm Harold Reynolds' daughter. I'm waiting for proof that nobody can deny. So here's what I want to ask you. What do you think the DNA is going to show? And more importantly, what do you think Virginia will do when the truth lands on her doorstep? Drop your prediction in the comments. I want to hear it. 10 days after the reunion, I opened my mailbox and found a letter from the law offices of Greer and Associates in Charlottesville. Thick envelope, embossed letterhead, the kind of paper that costs more per sheet than most people's lunch. I read it standing in the hallway of my building. Virginia had formally amended her will. The farm, the house, the savings accounts, all transferred to James upon her death. I was removed entirely. The stated reason, typed in crisp legal language: Athena Reynolds is not a biological child of Virginia Reynolds, and therefore not a recognized heir to the Reynolds family estate. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer next to the phone bill. Then I called an estate attorney for a free consultation. 30 minutes, that's all I needed. Virginia can change her portion of the estate however she wants, the attorney said. That's her legal right. But your father's will, Harold Reynolds, was probated in 2021. It names both you and James as beneficiaries. My children, Athena and James. His 50% of the farm, the house, that's governed by his will, not hers. Virginia's lawyer is arguing I'm not Harold's biological child. Are you? I'm waiting on DNA results. A pause. If you can prove Harold was your biological father, their entire argument collapses. Harold's will names you. DNA confirms paternity. Virginia can't override a dead man's wishes just because she's changed her mind about who counts as family. I hung up, sat at my kitchen table. Through the window, the city skyline glowed against a pink dusk. Virginia had lawyers. Virginia had narrative. Virginia had 47 witnesses who watched me walk away without a fight. But somewhere between here and a lab in North Carolina, a tube of my saliva was about to tell a story Virginia couldn't edit. James called on a Thursday evening. I was making pasta. The cheap boxed kind you eat when your appetite is gone, but your body still needs fuel. Athena, we need to talk. Go ahead. Mom's really struggling. She can't sleep. She feels terrible about how the reunion went. She held a microphone, James. She rehearsed it. She was emotional. People say things when they're... She had papers prepared. She consulted a lawyer before the reunion. She changed her will. That's not emotional. That's premeditated. Silence. I could hear him breathing. James always breathed louder when he was cornered, a habit since childhood. Look, I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling because Mom wants you to come home and talk. Talk meaning apologize. Talk meaning, yes. Acknowledge that she carried this burden for 33 years and, James, I turned off the stove. You knew. You drove in the night before. You sat next to her. You didn't flinch when she said it. Not 1 second of surprise. Nothing. You knew what she was going to say, and you let it happen. It's her right to. It's her right to announce in front of the entire family that she faked loving me for 33 years. You think that's a right? He went quiet. When James goes quiet, it means he knows he's wrong, but doesn't have the architecture to admit it. The estate belongs to Mom, he finally said. You need to accept that. Half belongs to Dad, and Dad wrote both our names. He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, noodles cooling on the stove. James hadn't asked a single question that mattered. Not, is it true? Not, are you okay? He only asked when I'd apologize. That told me everything. I drove back to Millbrook 2 weeks after the reunion to visit Aunt Margot. Stopped at Donovan's Coffee on Main Street, the same shop where Dad used to buy me hot chocolate on Saturday mornings after we'd finished feeding the horses. Karen Donovan was behind the counter. She'd known me since I was 8. She made my usual, medium drip, 1 sugar. But her eyes were different. That particular softness people get when they've heard something about you and don't know whether to say it. Athena, honey, I heard about the situation with your family. I'm real sorry. Thank you, Karen. Virginia was in here last week with her bridge group. Well, she talked about it. I didn't ask what Virginia said. I didn't need to. The look on Karen's face told me everything. Virginia had brought her performance to town. Walking down Main Street confirmed it. Mr. Gentry at the hardware store held the door a beat too long, his eyes full of pity. Mrs. Aldrich from the post office waved but looked away fast. Virginia hadn't just announced at the reunion. She'd expanded the tour, the church, the bridge club, the Wednesday morning Bible study. Her narrative was spreading through Millbrook like a ground fog. Low, quiet, everywhere. Then a woman I barely recognized from Virginia's bridge group stopped me outside the pharmacy. Sweetie, you should know. Your mother told us Harold practically abandoned the family for that woman. She said he nearly left Virginia for her. My father, Harold Reynolds, who built every shelf in the church nursery, who plowed driveways for free every winter, who never once raised his voice at anyone in this town, and Virginia was turning him into a cautionary tale. Old Mr. Patterson, Dad's closest friend, 81 years old, still sharp as a roofing nail, caught me at the corner of Elm and 3rd. Athena, he gripped my arm. Your father was the most decent man this town ever had. I don't believe a word that woman says, not one. Rachel called me that night, breathless. Athena, I found something. Margot had a storage closet full of family papers, tax documents, Christmas cards, church bulletins dating back decades. Rachel had been going through them since the reunion, looking for anything that might corroborate what Margot remembered about Virginia and Neil. There's a photo, Rachel said. Company picnic. Virginia's real estate office, spring event. She's standing next to a man. Dark hair, blue eyes, tall. The back of the photo says V and N, Spring Fling 88. 88. The year James was born. I looked up Neil Whitfield, Rachel continued. He died in 2015, but he has a son, Wade Whitfield, 30 years old, lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. I let that sit. Athena, I pulled up Neil's obituary photo. I compared it to the picnic picture. Rachel paused. Then I looked at James's Facebook profile. And? The jawline, the eyes, the way they smile, it's the same smile. Athena, James looks nothing like Uncle Harold, but he looks exactly like Neil Whitfield. I closed my eyes, saw Dad's face, round, warm, weathered from outdoor work. Brown eyes, compact build, hands too big for his frame. Then James, angular jaw, blue eyes, 6'1". I'd spent 33 years seeing them side by side and never let myself connect the dots. Don't tell anyone yet, I said. The DNA results aren't back. How long? 1 to 2 days. The app says processing. Rachel exhaled. Athena, if this is what we think it is, then Virginia didn't just lie about me. She used me as a smokescreen for a secret she's been hiding for 40 years. I hung up and sat in the dark. The shape of the truth was forming, and it looked nothing like the story Virginia had been telling. I drove to Millbrook that weekend and sat on Aunt Margot's porch as the sun dropped behind the ridge. From her hill, you could see the Reynolds farm, the white farmhouse, the workshop, the old tractor shed Dad always meant to paint. The lights in the kitchen were on. Virginia was home, probably sitting in the chair Harold built for her 30th birthday, drinking the Earl Grey she bought in bulk from the grocery in Charlottesville. Aunt Margot, I said, not looking away from the farm. If the DNA says Harold wasn't my biological father, I lose everything, not just the inheritance. I lose him. Margot rocked in her chair, took her time. You won't lose Harold. Harold chose you. Blood or no blood. That man drove to the hospital the night Claire passed, signed every paper they put in front of him, and carried you home. He didn't do that out of guilt. He did it because you were his. I knew she was right. In every way that mattered, Harold was my father. But in a courtroom, in a will that says, my children, biology matters. If I wasn't Harold's by blood, Virginia's lawyer would argue I had no legal standing. The farm would go to James. The house Dad built with his hands would be sold to a developer. Everything Harold Reynolds poured his life into would be erased. I checked the app. Results processing. Estimated delivery, 1 to 2 days. I put the phone away, stared at the farmhouse across the valley, the yellow kitchen light. I wished Dad were alive. Not to protect me. I'd stopped needing protection a long time ago. But to tell him that whatever the results said, he was my father. Every day. Every board he nailed. Every morning he made pancakes shaped like animals because he thought it was funny. The court wouldn't accept love as evidence, but I would. Wednesday, 7:14 a.m. I was pouring coffee when my phone buzzed. Your ancestry DNA results are ready. I sat down, set the mug on the counter, opened the app. The screen loaded in stages, ethnicity estimates first, then the part I needed. DNA relatives, matches. Match 1, Rachel Reynolds. Predicted relationship, first cousin. Shared DNA, 12.4%. I read it twice. First cousins share DNA through a common grandparent. Rachel's father was Harold's brother. If I matched Rachel as a first cousin, my DNA connected directly to the Reynolds family line. Harold was my biological father. I exhaled, set the phone down, picked it up, read it again. The number didn't change. 12.4%. First cousin, Reynolds bloodline. Confirmed. Then I scrolled down. Match 2, James Reynolds. Shared DNA, 0.8%. Predicted relationship, no predicted relationship. I stared at the screen. Full siblings share roughly 50%. Half siblings share around 25%. Below 3%, no close biological connection, 0.8. James and I shared almost no DNA. We weren't siblings. We weren't half-siblings. We weren't biologically related at all. I was Harold's daughter. James was not. Virginia had spent 33 years telling me I was the outsider, the one who didn't belong, the charity case, the obligation. And Harold, the man she'd painted as an unfaithful husband who'd forced his mistake on her, Harold was the one who'd been faithful all along. Virginia pointed her finger at me and said, blood decides who's real. Fine. Blood just decided, and the verdict wasn't what she expected. I set the phone on the counter and pressed my palms flat against the tile. Cold, solid, real. Virginia had stood in front of 47 people and declared James was her only real family, the Reynolds blood, the legitimate heir. She'd used bloodline as her weapon, swung it at me like an axe. And the DNA, her own standard, her own metric, just proved that I was the only Reynolds at the table. James carried Virginia's blood, but Harold's? Not a trace. She used blood to erase me. Blood just erased him. I called Aunt Margot at 7:31 a.m. She picked up on the first ring. Aunt Margot, Dad is my biological father. A sharp breath. Then, thank God. Oh, thank God. I waited for her crying to settle. Then I said the rest. James and I share less than 1% DNA. He's not my sibling, not half, not anything. We have no biological relationship. The line went silent. Not the awkward kind. The kind that comes when someone's brain is rearranging 40 years of memory. Neil Whitfield, Margot whispered. Yes, James is Virginia's and Neil's, not Harold's. Did Harold know? I'd thought about this during the 17 minutes between reading the results and making the call. Harold never said a word against James, never treated him differently, never let the slightest coldness creep into his voice when he said his son's name. I think he suspected, I said. But Dad chose to love James anyway. He chose to stay silent. Margot was crying again, quietly, the way people cry when the grief isn't fresh, when it's old, buried grief that just found a new exit. Harold carried that for years. All those years, Margot. He knew Virginia. He knew. And he still loved that boy. That's who Harold was, Margot said. I steadied my voice. Virginia stood in front of the entire family and said I wasn't real. She humiliated me. She's telling the town that Harold was unfaithful, that he nearly abandoned the family. She's rewriting a dead man's life. I paused. And the whole time, according to her own standard, James is the one who doesn't belong to the Reynolds family. What are you going to do? I'm going to send her the truth, the right way. I wrote the letter 4 times. The first draft was furious. 3 pages of everything I'd never said. How it felt to sit in the back seat, to hear "you should be grateful" instead of "I love you." To watch her erase me from Dad's eulogy. I let myself write every word. Then I shredded it. The second draft was cold, clinical. I sounded like I was filing a tax amendment. Shredded. The third was too short, passive-aggressive, shredded. The fourth one I kept. It was 8 sentences. Mom, enclosed are the results of my ancestry DNA test. They confirm that I am the biological daughter of Harold Reynolds. My DNA matches the Reynolds family line through cousin Rachel. I belong to this family. Not because you allowed it, but because Dad chose me. The results also show that James and I share less than 1% DNA. We have no biological relationship. I am Harold's daughter. James is not. I'm not sending this to hurt you. I'm sending it because you stood in front of 47 people and told them I wasn't real family. I have the right to correct the record. I don't need your apology. I just need you to stop lying about Dad. I printed the DNA results, placed them behind the letter in a manila envelope, sealed it, drove to the post office and sent it certified mail, tracking number, signature required. I also mailed a copy to my attorney. The clerk stamped the receipt at 11:47 a.m. on a Thursday. Virginia would receive it Saturday. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and breathed. Just breathed. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel like it had a fist inside it. The truth was on its way. And for the first time, Virginia wouldn't be the one telling it. I just mailed the most important letter of my life, and my hands weren't shaking. For 33 years, I tried to earn Virginia's love by being good enough, smart enough, quiet enough. I'm done earning. The truth doesn't need permission. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Now let me tell you what happened when Virginia opened that envelope. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. I wasn't there, but Aunt Margot was. She'd come over for the weekly brunch Virginia still hosted for appearances. 2 of Virginia's bridge friends, Dorothy and Helen, were already at the kitchen table with their coffee and banana bread. The mail carrier knocked because certified letters require a signature. Virginia signed, carried the envelope inside, and sat down at the counter. Margot told me later she knew exactly what it was. The return address was a post office in the city. The envelope was thick. Virginia opened it calmly, read the letter first. Margot could see her eyes tracking left to right, steady, controlled. Then she turned to the DNA printout. Her face changed. It didn't collapse the way faces do in movies. No gasp, no dramatic hand over the mouth. It just drained. Color left her cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. Her lips pressed into a white line. The paper trembled in her hands. Then it slipped, fell flat on the kitchen table, face up. Dorothy leaned forward. "Virginia, what's wrong? You look pale." Virginia didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the paper. Margot, standing in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder, could read the header from where she stood. Ancestry DNA results. Athena Reynolds and James Reynolds. Shared DNA, 0.8%. No predicted biological relationship. Helen reached for the paper. Virginia didn't stop her. Helen read it, looked up at Virginia, then looked at Margot. "I don't understand," Helen said. "This says they're not related." Dorothy took the paper from Helen, read it, set it down gently, as if it were something fragile. "Virginia," Dorothy said slowly, "what does this mean?" The kitchen was silent except for the refrigerator hum and the clock above the stove ticking its way through what might have been the longest 10 seconds of Virginia's life. Margot watched Virginia's face, and Virginia looked up, not at Dorothy, not at Helen, at Margot. Because Margot was Harold's sister, and Margot's eyes said what her mouth didn't. "I know." Virginia's throat moved. She swallowed once, twice. Then she said the only thing that mattered. "Who told her about Neil?" Not, "This is wrong." Not, "These results are fake." Not, "I can explain." Who told her about Neil? Virginia called me 2 hours later. I was sitting on my couch, reading a book I wasn't absorbing, waiting for exactly this call. "Are you satisfied?" Her voice was flat, controlled. The syrup was gone. "You wanted to destroy this family. Congratulations." "I sent you a letter, Mom. Privately, in an envelope. I didn't stand in front of 47 people with a microphone." "You don't understand what you've done." "I understand exactly what I've done. I proved that I'm Harold's biological daughter, and I proved that James isn't. There are things that are more complicated than DNA, Athena. Like why James and I share 0% of Harold's genetics? Like who Neil Whitfield is." 5 seconds of silence. I counted. "How dare you?" Her voice cracked just slightly at the edges. "I'm not daring anything, Mom. I'm reading test results. You used bloodline to cut me out. You told the entire family, and half of Millbrook, that blood determines who's real and who's not. I'm just applying your standard to everyone. If you tell James—" She stopped. I could hear her calculating, running the scenarios, assessing damage, the way she'd always done. But this time the math didn't work. The variable she'd hidden for 40 years was on paper now. "I haven't contacted James," I said. "But I won't hide the truth if someone asks. That's the difference between us, Mom. I don't hide things." "You're going to regret this." "Maybe. But I'll regret it honestly. That's more than you can say." I hung up first, set the phone face down on the cushion. My whole life, Virginia ended every conversation. Decided when we talked, what we talked about, when the talk was over. This time, I pressed the red button. And I didn't pick the phone back up. Lily called me 3 days later. Her voice was careful, measured in the way pharmacists speak when they're delivering news about a prescription that's going to change your life. "Athena, I need to ask you something directly. James's Ancestry DNA account, we share a family login. I saw a notification. It says you and James have no predicted biological relationship." "That's correct." "What does that mean?" "It means James and I don't share enough DNA to be siblings, or half-siblings. We're not biologically related, Lily. Silence. A long one. I'm Harold's daughter, I continued. My DNA matches the Reynolds line. James's doesn't. So James is Virginia's biological son, but not Harold's. I heard her exhale. A slow, shaking release. Virginia's been calling James every day since she got your letter, begging him not to look at the results on the app. She told him the test was fake, that you manipulated the data. Did he believe her? He wanted to, but James is a lot of things. He's not stupid. He knows you can't fake an ancestry DNA comparison. Is he going to look? I told him he has to. He's resisting, but it's eating at him. He keeps looking in the mirror. Athena, he keeps looking at old photos of Harold and then looking in the mirror. My chest tightened, because I knew that look. I'd lived it for 33 years, staring at a face, trying to find yourself in someone else's features. Lily, I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't create this. Virginia did. Then, quieter. Athena, I should have said something at the reunion. I sat there and watched it happen, and I didn't open my mouth. That's on me. You're opening it now. That counts. She's begging him not to look, Lily repeated. That tells me everything I need to know. Aunt Margot and Uncle Dean called a family meeting. Reynolds' side only. No Virginia, no James. They held it at Margot's house on a Sunday afternoon. 12 people in the living room, mismatched chairs pulled from the kitchen, the dining room, the back porch. Margot stood by the fireplace with the DNA printout in her hand. She laid it out plainly. Athena is Harold's biological daughter. DNA confirmed. Athena matches the Reynolds family line. James and Athena share less than 1% DNA. James is not Harold's son. The room reacted in layers. Silence first, then murmuring, then Uncle Dean's voice cutting through like a saw blade. Virginia stood in front of every one of us at that reunion. She looked Athena in the face and said she was never real family. She told this town that Harold was unfaithful, that Harold forced her to raise another woman's child. Dean's neck was red. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. And the whole time, the whole damn time, it was Virginia who stepped out. James is the one who isn't Harold's. Cousin Mark stood up. She desecrated Harold's memory, in public, with a microphone. Harold couldn't defend himself, Aunt Phyllis added quietly. She was 81, Harold's oldest sister, hadn't spoken to anyone in the family since her hip surgery. But she'd driven 40 minutes to be in this room. He's been in the ground 5 years, and she's slandering him to anyone who'll listen, calling him unfaithful, saying he forced her. That man never forced anyone to do anything in his life. Phyllis picked up her phone and called Virginia right there in the living room. Virginia didn't answer. By the end of that week, 8 members of the Reynolds family had called Virginia. Not to yell. Just to say they knew, and they were disappointed. Virginia's phone calls went to voicemail. Her Facebook posts went unanswered. Old Mr. Patterson ran into Virginia outside the post office on a Tuesday. Margot heard about it from 3 different people. Harold Reynolds carried that girl home in broad daylight because Harold lived honest, Patterson told Virginia. You hid a secret for 40 years. Don't you ever speak his name like that again. Virginia didn't respond. She got in her car and drove home. James finally opened the results on a Thursday night. Lily told me later he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop for 45 minutes before clicking the link. The screen loaded. He saw his match list, his predicted relationships, and the absence where Athena Reynolds, sister, should have been, replaced by no predicted relationship. He drove to Millbrook the next morning, 4 hours, didn't call ahead. Lily told me what happened in pieces, over 3 separate phone calls, because James didn't tell her all at once. He'd say a few sentences, go quiet, say a few more days later. He walked into the kitchen. Virginia was at the table. Neil Whitfield. Who is Neil Whitfield, Mom? Virginia pressed her hands flat on the table. Her fingers were white. You don't understand, James. It was complicated. Harold and I, we weren't happy. Neil was... Who is my father? Harold is your father. Harold is not my father. The DNA says 0, Mom. 0. Virginia started to cry. Not the controlled, audience-ready tears she'd produced at the reunion. Messy, jagged crying. The kind that comes from a place that hasn't been opened in decades. I loved Neil, she whispered. Harold was a good man, but Harold was just what? James's voice broke. The man who taught me to ride a bike? Who sat in the bleachers at every game I ever played? Who worked that farm 60 hours a week so I could go to college? Who I called Dad every single day of my life? Virginia reached for his hand. James pulled it away. You humiliated Athena in front of the whole family because she wasn't blood. You said blood is what makes someone real family. Those were your words, Mom. With a microphone. His chin trembled. But I'm the one who isn't blood. You knew. You always knew. And you chose to destroy Athena to protect your lie about me. He walked out the front door. Didn't look back. Lily said James didn't speak to Virginia for 3 weeks. The longest silence of Virginia's life. And for the first time, she was the one waiting for a phone that never rang. I hired an estate attorney the following Monday. Formal retainer. Paid with money I'd saved over 7 years of working Saturdays nobody noticed. I sat across from her desk and laid out the facts like a balance sheet, because that's how I process the world. Credits, debits, what adds up and what doesn't. Harold's will, probated August 2021, property split, 50% to Virginia, 50% divided equally between my children, Athena and James. The farm, the house, the savings. The attorney reviewed the documents. Virginia amended her own will. That's within her rights. She can leave her 50% to whoever she chooses. But Harold's portion is governed by his will. He named you specifically. Virginia's legal team is arguing I shouldn't qualify as Harold's child. The DNA results eliminate that argument entirely. You're Harold's biological daughter. It's in the data. I nodded. Then I said the part that mattered most. I don't want to remove Virginia from the house. She lives there. I'm not going to put a 67-year-old woman on the street. The attorney looked up. I want to protect the farm. Virginia has been talking about transferring everything to James. James mentioned to Lily that a developer offered to buy the land last year. 120 acres outside Millbrook. That's prime real estate for subdivision. You want to block the sale? I want to preserve what my father built. He cleared that land. He planted those trees. He built that house board by board. The attorney filed a petition that week to protect Harold's estate from unauthorized transfer. There was an irony I didn't miss. By DNA, James wasn't Harold's biological son. But Harold wrote James's name in his will because Harold chose to love him. I wasn't going to cross that name out. Dad wouldn't have wanted that. Dad wrote both our names, I told the attorney. I'm protecting both. 6 weeks later, I drove to Millbrook on a Saturday morning before the sun cleared the ridge. The farm was quiet. Virginia wasn't home. She'd gone to stay with James and Lily in the city, a temporary arrangement that everyone knew was Virginia's way of running from the town that now whispered her name instead of mine. I parked by the workshop, got out, stood in the grass for a minute, just breathing. The fields stretched out in every direction, green from the June rains, the white oaks along the creek taller than I remembered. Dad planted those when I was 3. I climbed them when I was 10. Now they shaded half the south pasture. I pushed open the workshop door. The smell hit me first. Oak shavings, linseed oil, the faint ghost of the coffee Dad brewed on the workbench hot plate every morning at 5. His tools hung on the pegboard exactly where he'd left them. Clawhammer, hand plane, the chisel I'd held the day of the funeral, a pencil still tucked behind a bracket, sharpened to a point he never got to use. Everything in its place, everything waiting for hands that wouldn't come back. I ran my fingers along the workbench, found a groove he'd worn into the edge from years of clamping boards, smooth as river stone. Next to it, a coffee mug ring stained into the wood, 5 years old and still visible, like a fingerprint he'd left behind on purpose. On the shelf above the bench, I noticed something I'd missed before. A small framed photo, dusty, turned slightly toward the wall. I picked it up. Dad and me, standing beside the white oak he planted the year I was born. I was maybe 7 in the photo, sitting on his shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun. On the back, in his handwriting, "Me and my girl, best day." I put it back on the shelf, facing forward this time. Margot's truck pulled up at 7:30. She brought coffee and 2 blueberry muffins from Donovan's. We sat on the workshop porch, looking out at the farm Harold built, and said almost nothing for 20 minutes. Some silences are the fullest conversations you'll ever have. Then Margot said, "Harold would be proud of you, not because you won, because you stayed honest." I held my coffee with both hands and watched the sun hit the farmhouse windows. For the first time in months, the view didn't hurt. It just looked like home. 2 months after the reunion, a letter arrived at my apartment. Handwritten. James's penmanship. Tight, slanted, the kind of writing that comes from someone pressing too hard on the pen. No return address, but I recognized the stationery. Lily kept a box of cream-colored cards in their kitchen drawer. I'd seen it at Christmases. I opened it standing up, read it twice before I sat down. "Athena, I don't know what to say to you. I've started this letter 6 times and thrown every version away. This is the one I'm mailing because if I rewrite it again, I'll never send it. I don't know who I am anymore. My whole life I thought Harold was my father. I looked at him and saw myself. Now I look in the mirror and I see a stranger. I keep pulling up that photo Rachel found. Neil Whitfield at the company picnic. The jawline. The eyes. They're mine. I started therapy last week. The therapist asked me what I lost, and I said, my father. She said Harold is still my father. But it's not the same. It's not the same, and I don't know how to make it the same. I'm not going to apologize in this letter because I don't know how to apologize for something this large. I sat next to Mom at that reunion, and I let her do what she did. I didn't say a word. That's going to take me a long time to sit with. I just need time. James. I folded the letter, set it on the table, didn't reply. James was in pain. Real pain. Not the performed kind Virginia specialized in. His identity had cracked down the middle, and he was trying to hold the two halves together with shaking hands. I didn't owe him forgiveness, but I could afford him time. Time was something nobody in this family had ever given me. I wrote Virginia one final letter. This time I only needed one draft. Mom, I'm not going to pretend everything is fine. You used my origins to control me for 33 years. You stood in front of our family and announced you'd been faking love for me since the day Dad brought me home. You told this town that Harold was unfaithful, the most honest man Millbrook has ever known. You rewrote a dead man's story to protect your own. I know the truth now. I know about Neil. I know that James is Neil's son, not Harold's. I know that Dad probably suspected, and I know he chose to love James anyway, because that's the kind of man Harold Reynolds was. You're not that kind of person, Mom. You had the same choice Dad had, to love a child who wasn't biologically yours, and you spent 33 years reminding me that I wasn't enough. I don't hate you. Hate takes energy I'd rather spend on things that matter. But I will not allow you to continue doing what you've done. I will not absorb your lies. I will not stand still while you rewrite my father's legacy. If you ever want to talk, really talk, not perform, not manipulate, not control, I will listen. But I won't listen to lies. Not anymore. I love you, but I love the truth more. Dad taught me that. I sealed the envelope, mailed it from the same post office counter where I'd sent the DNA results. The clerk recognized me now. Small towns have long memories. I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, closed my eyes. For the first time in months, my breathing was even. Not forced even. Actually even. The kind of steady that comes after a storm passes and you realize you're still standing. 6 months later, and here's where things stand. Virginia never apologized. But she stopped calling me the girl who isn't mine. Whether that's growth or strategy, I honestly can't tell. With Virginia, the line between the two has always been blurry. James is in therapy. Lily says he's working through it, slowly, the way you dismantle something built on a cracked foundation, one board at a time. He hasn't called me, but he hasn't called Virginia much either, and from what I hear, that silence is teaching her more than any confrontation ever could. The farm is legally protected now. Harold's portion of the estate can't be sold or transferred without my signature. I didn't cross James's name out of Dad's will. Harold wrote both our names because he chose to be a father to both of us, and I'm not going to dishonor that choice. Virginia can leave her half to whoever she wants. That's her right. But the land Harold cleared, the house he built, the trees he planted, those stay. I still live in the city, still work the same job, still drive to Millbrook once a month. But now I go to the farm, not to Virginia's kitchen. I sit in Dad's workshop and drink coffee on the porch and listen to the creek. On my desk at home, there are 2 photos now. One is Dad in the workshop smiling, sawdust in his beard. The other is new, a small, faded picture Margot found tucked in the back of Dad's toolbox. A woman with brown hair and a tired smile, holding a baby in a yellow blanket. Claire, my mother, smiling like someone who knew she wouldn't be there long but wanted the record to show she was happy. Dad brought me home in broad daylight. No hiding, no shame. He walked through the front door and said, "This is my daughter." That's the biggest inheritance he left me. Not the farm, not the house. The truth that I was chosen. And if you're still here, thank you for staying with me through this whole story. I want to ask you one thing. Do you think Harold knew about James? And if he knew, why do you think he stayed silent all those years? Drop your answer in the comments. Every family has a corner no one talks about. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't speaking up. It's choosing love when you have every reason not to. If you know someone going through something like this, share this video. Check the description for more stories. I'll see you there.